Okay, so I'm going to try this again because I've sort of got Goodreads working now. I decided to do a wrap-up video for September. I haven't done one of these in a while, and most of what I've been reading has been for school, but I have been reading some more stuff recently, so I don't have everything because I already made a trip to the bookstore. If you don't know, when I keep a bag, Bath & Body Works, Victoria's Secret, whatever, just random bags. Sorry, my hair's look got little horns. I feel like crap today, so I just kind of threw my hair up. And whenever the bag gets full, I take it to the bookstore, sell whatever they'll take, and then I take whatever's left to a friend of mine at church. So I don't have everything, but I'm going to try to go through and let you know that I do have. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through, because Goodreads tells me when I read stuff because I'm really OCD about updating it. I'm going to go through with that, and then I will go through my syllabi and tell you the other things that I read that were not full books or whatever. So, going to get started with that. Some of the stuff for my syllabi might be a little bit off in dates. I might have read them in October or in August because I get a little bit behind with my reading because there's a lot of it. And I'm not going to tell you I read this chapter and this chapter and this chapter of history and geology stuff. No, just the literature classes. So, I'm going to start with that I read Oedipus the King for my World Lit. I'm sorry, I feel like crap, so I've got a zero fuck going. My World Lit class, the one I read was in Norton Anthology of World Literature, Volume A, and it was this one. And it's translated by Robert Baggs, so it's that translation. So I read that. I also have a blog, and I've been trying to update the blog with what I've read. So, like reviews and stuff. A lot of them are spoilery, some of them aren't. I kind of suck at it, but it's musingsofacat10.blogspot.com if you want to check it out. Okay, the next thing is The School for Scandal by Richard Brinsley Sheridan. I read this for my British literature class. This is my copy, and then there's other plays in this. That. She gave us a PDF, but reading stuff on my computer gives me a migraine, so I picked this up at our bookstore. Oedipus the King, I've read before. I love it. Would read it again. Would recommend it. And School for Scandal, this is the first time I've read this. Absolutely loved it. Would definitely recommend it. It's great. Even if you are not really big into reading plays, this one is worth it because it's absorbing enough that you might not even realize you're reading a play. Thing I thought was funny, this is one of my British Lit textbooks. It's got this painting on it, and my School for Scandal has the same painting. Yes. So the next thing I read was The Red Queen by Philippa Gregory, which is the third book in the Plantagenet and Tudor novels. Philippa Gregory is a great historical fiction writer. She writes mostly British historical fiction. These can be read out of order. I got this, I had to go to the campus bookstore to get Scantrons, and they had these shelves full of $1, $3, and $5 books, and I got this for like $1 or $3, I don't remember which. And it was great. I loved it. It's about Margaret Beaufort, who is the mom of Henry VII, and that's a little bit before my time period, so I learned a lot of stuff. Read my blog for more about it, but I think she's a little bit nuts. But it was a really good book. I loved it. I love Philippa Gregory, and I'm looking forward to getting back into this series. I've started a couple books in the series, in like high school, and I read The Other Berlin Girl, which is part of the series, years ago. So I'm looking forward to getting more into these. This was great. I loved it. And then okay, I read The Mind Readers by Lori Brighton, which is the first book in the Mind Readers series. This was really, really good. When I was writing the blog post for this, I realized that there wasn't a lot of actual things that happened, but it seemed like a lot was happening while it was going on. Like, a lot of things happened, there just weren't that many events, if you know what I mean. But I think that's because the author was setting up the universe and all of that, and how the abilities work and everything. This is really good. It's about this girl who can read minds, and her grandma can, and she thinks it's a family thing, but then she finds out that other people can, and there's these two groups of people, and one of them's good and one of them's bad, but then you realize, are the good ones really good, and are the bad ones really bad, and etc., 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 and it's great. Definitely recommend this. I'm looking forward to reading the next book. Whenever I have money to order books, because I have an enormous list of books that I need to order from Amazon. And then after that, okay, some of these books I had already started, but after that, I'm working a play at school. We're doing Diary of Anne Frank, and I'm working that. So I've been taking books with me to read, because I'm doing wardrobe, and usually wardrobe has stuff to do, but in this play there's not really much for us to do for like 2 hours, especially me. So I basically sit and read in the dark for 2 hours. It's either in the dark in the green room or in the cold in the dressing room, so I have to pick. So I've been knocking off quite a few books. I finished 4 books because of the show so far, and I almost finished another one, but I couldn't concentrate and I fell asleep. One of them you won't see because I technically read it in October, so I'll try and show you that next month. But the first one of those I did was Doomed Queen Anne by Carolyn Meyer, which is the 3rd book in the Young Royals series. Similar to the Philippa Gregory books, these can be read out of order. This one is obviously about Anne Boleyn, and these are middle grade, I believe. Yeah, 12 and up. There's our middle grade books, but even reading this as an adult, it doesn't seem like it. Again, read my blog post thing for more on this, because I'm better at expressing myself about books in writing. English major problems, I guess. But yeah, this was really good. I really enjoyed this, and I'm looking forward to reading the next book in this as well. Oh, and the Philippa Gregory, the Red Queen, and this Doomed Queen Anne, Alex has dibsed both of those. He wanted them. He wants to read them. I don't know when he will, but he did. So, I don't know if that matters, but it's a thing. Then I have Brave the Betrayal by Catherine Applegate, which is the 8th book in the Everworld series. The concept for this series is really, really interesting. The concept of this series is all the gods and all the mythologies, even alien ones that we don't know about, existed. And then they left and made an alternate universe, and they all live there. So you can be walking, and one second it's Greece, and the next second it's Africa or whatever. It's a really interesting concept, and this is not badly written. It's just not written as interestingly as the concept is. So if like the concept is this much interesting, the writing is only this much interesting, if that makes sense. It's good, but it's not so good that I'm like, you have to read it. It's good. The concept is good. It's just the writing isn't as good as the concept. So, I'm going to be reading the next one of those whenever I can make an Amazon order, but that may not be until the spring. So, okay, then I read Return to the Isle of the Lost, which is already been sold to the bookstore. That's by Melissa De La Cruz. It's the second book in the Descendants series or duology. But the thing is, there's two books. Well, it's complicated. There's the Isle of the Lost, which is the first book. Then there's the Disney movie Descendants, which takes place next. And then there's this book, Return to the Isle of the Lost, which takes place third. And then there's a junior novel, which I think covers the events that happened in the movie. But I'm not sure, because I haven't read that one. Okay, so this one, I don't want to spoil it, so I'm not going to go into it. The first book is basically all of the Disney movies. All of their kingdoms have been united into one big country. All of the villains have been exiled to this Isle of the Lost without any magic, and they don't ever get anything new. All they get is the kingdom's garbage, Aragon's garbage. And they've somehow all had kids, even though there's only like one of each of them. They don't ever talk about their other parents, just their villain parents. And then Aragon, the big kingdom, decides we're going to have some of the villain kids come to school here because they didn't do anything wrong. And it just goes from there. It's great. I love it. I like the movie too. The second book I do have a bit of a problem with because the way it ended, it did not end like, oh, there could be another book, but it's fine. It ended like, oh, there should be a third book, but there's no third book. They're going to do another series, but it looks like that series is going to be not tying up the ends that I feel are loose in this book, so that kind of annoys me because I did really enjoy this. But, yeah, if you're remotely interested in the Disney stuff or even just fantasy kind of books, I would definitely recommend these. They're really good. If you don't think you'll like the movie, though, you might not want to start the books because you do kind of need the movie. The events are kind of important for the second book and as for the story in general. Okay, the next thing I read is Beowulf, which is for my World Lit class. This is also in my Norton Anthology of World Lit Volume A. And no, it's not. No, it's not. I lied. I'm sorry. It was an accident. It's in my Norton Anthology of World Literature Volume B. And it is here. And it's the translation by Seamus Heaney. And it was really good. I had started reading Beowulf, a different translation, in high school, but I never finished it. Not for any particular reason, just one of those books that I grabbed to read for fun, and then I set it down and forgot about it. So it was great to finish it. I really enjoyed it. Definitely would recommend reading it. We're reading some great stuff in my classes, and I really enjoyed that. Those were all of the full books I read in September. So I read 8 full books in September, which for me is kind of sad, but it was also the first full month of school, so the fact that I read that much is a miracle. Like, I hadn't read anything fun, really, since school started. Like, I enjoyed stuff I was reading for school. I just didn't read anything that was just for fun until I got the Red Queen, and then I couldn't stop that, and then I started Doom Queen Anne, and I set that down, and then I read The Mind Readers, and then the show started, and I've been reading because of that. So, but anyway, now on to the excerpts for September. So, what I'm going to do is holy crud. Sorry, I just logged on to Blackboard and I just realized they've uploaded like 8 things I have to deal with. What I'm going to do is I'm logging on to Blackboard and I'm going to bring up my syllabi for my 2 literature classes. And I'm just going to tell you the stuff that I was supposed to read, we were supposed to go over in September. Because I don't remember when I read what. So, yeah. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to go over is my World Lit 1 class. So it's World Literature 1. They have these as a requirement. You're supposed to take part 1 and part 2. I'll probably be taking part 2 in the spring. And we have 3 books. The Norton Anthology of World Literature, Book A, which you've seen, Book B, which you've seen, and Book C, which we have not started yet. We will be starting, I think, next week. And then we have a couple things that are like PDFs, like School for Scandal, that I ended up getting hard copies of because PDFs give me migraines when I try to read them, especially when it's an entire play or a book or something. Which, okay. So, first thing on here for World Lit is Oedipus the King, which we've already gone over. Beowulf, which we've already gone over. Then, this is Book B. We're in Book B. So it's going to take me a second because I'm trying to, look up where these things are. We read this thing called Circling the Mediterranean, Europe, and the Islamic World, which is basically just an introduction to reading literature from that era, or area, or both. And then we read The 1001 Nights, which I actually just read. I've been so behind in my homework, we're not even going to talk about it. 552. I'm sorry if this gets long because of this, but we read The 1001 Nights, which is actually just excerpts of The 1001 Nights. But I did add the book to my Amazon to buy list. We read excerpts. Everything was translated by Hussein Hadawi, except for the excerpt of The Third Old Man's Tale, which was translated by Jerome Clinton. I absolutely love this. Everybody knows the basics of the story, but it's great to actually read part of it, and I can't wait until I order the book and I read the rest of it and the entirety of it or whatever. The next thing was an excerpt from The Diversity of the World by Marco Polo, which was translated by Sharon Kinoshita. I thought this was going to be kind of boring, but it was actually really interesting. It's not so interesting that I want to buy the book and read the whole thing, but it was really interesting to read. And one of the things I thought was really cool, was that if you've seen that article that came out in the last few years that goes, oh, unicorns were real, but they weren't what we thought they were, and they look like this, and it's like this whole big revelation. Marco Polo knew about it, and he read them. That was like the coolest thing. Or not read them, he wrote about them, and he saw them. And he even said, they're not the things we talk about. They're ugly. But that was just really cool to me to read, and I did really enjoy reading this. Okay, then the last things for this class for September are in book A. I hate going back and forth and back and forth. We've got, she says ancient Chinese literature and thought in the syllabus, but it's early Chinese literature and thought, which is another one of those introductory things about where we're reading from. And I always find those interesting. Those are always fun. And then we read what she's got labeled as Confucius, which there's a little introductory thing. Most of these things I've been forgetting to say, but we've been having to read the introductory thing that goes with them, which is fine with me because I enjoy it. It gives me some history and some background about the author and the text. But this is excerpts from Confucius's Analects, which was translated by Simon Leys. So I read that. That was interesting. It was interesting to read, but it was also kind of boring because it's like reading from the book of Proverbs in the Bible. It's just like, do this, don't do this, except for they all start with the master said. So it was interesting to read and learn about Confucius and read some of his stuff finally, but it was also kind of like repetitive, which annoyed me. Then the last thing she's got on here is the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu, which includes the intro part and then the actual Tao Te Ching. I'm not going to talk about the romanization because it's all over the place. It's translated by D.C. Lau, but I'm actually so behind, and it's only October 4th, that I haven't read that yet. So, I can't say anything about it. So that's everything we were supposed to have read in September for my world literature class. And then my British literature, our Wi-Fi sucks right now. Our British literature class, which is British literature 1700 to 1800. We have 3 official books for that. They're all the Longman Anthology of British Literature. We got Volume 1C, which covers the Restoration in the 18th century, Volume 2A, which is the Romantics and their contemporaries, and Volume 2B, the Victorian Age. And then, of course, the little things that I've told you like 3 times now that I got the hard copies of on my own because I don't like migraines. Okay. It's not wanting to load for some reason, so it is loading, it's just taking a bit. Okay. So what we're supposed to have read in September for this class is, first we have the anthology book 1C, which looks like this. And we are finishing up the 18th century. So the first thing is excerpts from the Turkish Embassy Letters by Lady Mary Wortley Montagu. And these were really interesting. They were, like, I had to pay attention, but they were interesting. They talk about this lady's trip to Turkey and how she left her husband and all of this stuff. And they're written in the letter, in a format of letters, but they're not letters that she actually wrote and sent. She wrote like an epistolic journal to a fictional person, and she intended to be published after she died, which it was, which is kind of interesting. We learned a lot about epistolic writing either novels in letter form or journals in letter form or anything in letter form, which was apparently really in the 18th century. Then the next thing we read was 20. Is this book C, right? Yes. Okay. Was Alexander Pope. This tiny little excerpt right here from Epistle 2 by Alexander Pope, which is in poetry format, which I just have a really hard time reading poetry. It's really difficult for me to concentrate on it, and it was really short, so I don't really have anything to say about that. The next thing we read was it was from Jubilate. It was an excerpt from Jubilate Agno, and it was written by Christopher Smart, who apparently went a little bit mad and wrote this while he was mad, but it was really cool. It's all about cats and dogs and how one speaks Greek and one speaks Latin, and there's this part about his cat Joffrey, which is spelled Jeffrey, and it's just really cool. I liked this. I'm not a big poetry person, but I like this. I really enjoyed it. I made Alex read it because he is a poetry person. This is great. If you like cats or dogs or animals or poetry or literature or anything remotely relating to this, read it. It's so good. So that's how you pronounce or spell it or everything. But yeah, it's just the excerpt we read is so good. And I don't think the whole thing is that much longer, but then the next thing we read was 26. Sorry, I'm trying to go through my book and find these so I can show them to you guys like I've been doing. Was Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard by Thomas Gray, which it's a poem. It's good. Again, poetry's not really my thing. If you like poetry, go for it. It's nice, but it's a poem. The next thing we read was kind of annoying. Shannon, sorry if you're just getting a big face full of my book, although my book or my face with my spazzy hair, I don't know which one you'd rather see. But we read an excerpt from A Dictionary of the English Language by Samuel Johnson. Yeah. Okay, Samuel Johnson wrote the first proper English dictionary. It was really cool. It's really neat. And we did read the first chunk of the excerpt was the preface, which is cool. It's really interesting. The preface was great. He writes about his method, his conclusion, all of this stuff. But then we read actual entries, which is cool for the first 10 or so because he tells like we have now, like, the word future. He tells future, it's NS, it's from the adjective, time to come, somewhat to happen hereafter. That's the definition. And then he has a couple of quotes. This one has a quote from Macbeth, and this one has a quote from Locke. He used quotes from people that he thought were really excellent writers and showed how the words should be used really well. He tried not to use contemporary writers unless they're really great, and that sort of thing. So that's really cool. For the first 10 entries or so, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 2-part pages, which amounts to about 8 full pages of entries. Yeah. I mean, it was neat, but I don't need 8 full pages of entries to get the idea. Then, so now you've really got this idea of Johnson and who he is and what he's like and all of that. And the next thing we read was an excerpt from the London Journal by James Boswell, and this excerpt is the chunk titled First Meeting with Johnson. I don't know if you can even see that. But this was cool because it talked about this guy meeting. It was only like a page long. It talked about this guy meeting Samuel Johnson and what he thought of him and all of this. So that was neat to read after just reading something Johnson wrote. Then after that, we read 2 excerpts from 2 epistolic after that we read one other thing about Johnson. We read an excerpt from The Life of Samuel Johnson by James Boswell, which is kind of like a biography, which is common to us, but was apparently the way it was written was new then. So that was cool to read. And it was very, like, subjective, which was also interesting to read. And then after that, we read the 2 excerpts from the 2 epistolic novels, which are novels written in letter form. The first one was an excerpt from Pamela, or Virtue Rewarded, by Samuel Richardson, which is really interesting, and I kind of feel bad. Well, I do feel bad for her, even though she's fictional, and it was interesting to read, and I do want to get that novel and read it. It's on my list. And then the other one was an excerpt from Evelina, or The History of a Young Lady's Entrance into the World, by Frances Burney, which, being written by a woman, that gives it a different viewpoint anyway. It was also really interesting. I also really enjoyed it, and I also added that to my list of books to buy the whole book. Then the last thing we read, or we're supposed to, no wait, there's more. Oh, this class. The next thing was School for Scandal, which we already talked about. And then we had our exam, and then we moved on to book 2A, which looks like this. We moved on to the 19th century, the Romantics and their contemporaries, which I've had classes that cover this before, but until what we're going to be reading for next week, the majority of it is stuff that's new to me. So, the first thing in here that we read was The History of Mary Prince, a West Indian Slave, related by herself, which was obviously written by Mary Prince. This was interesting. It was really sad how she was treated, obviously, but that's not how she didn't write it to be sad. She just wrote, like, this is the stuff that happened. It is interesting. I'm not going to get the book, but it is interesting. I'm just not in the biography mood, I think is what it is. Then, after that, we read Amazing Grace, which is written by John Newton, and this is just a written down without music of the song, all of the words for it, some of which even I'm not familiar with, but most people are familiar with this song. Not really much to say about that. Then we read an excerpt from Abstract of the Information Laid on the Table of the House of Commons on the Subject of Slave Trade in the Edinburgh Review, which is a Quarterly, a newspaper. It was edited by Francis Jeffrey until 1829. Which is this. And it's basically just what was going on with, in England with abolishing slavery in the House of Commons. Which was honestly kind of boringly written, but the subject matter is interesting, but it was just not that interestingly written. Then we read Toussaint L'Ouverture, my French probably sucks, by William Wordsworth, To Toussaint L'Ouverture, by William Wordsworth, which is, again, a poem, a very, very short poem. I mean, it goes on the next page, but that's about it. And, yeah, it was nice. I mean, I've already said like 5 times how I feel about poetry. Poetry's nice, I don't have anything against it, it's just not my thing, and I have a difficult time reading it. And then we read an excerpt from A Vindication of the Rights of Woman from something by Mary Wollstonecraft, which I have read a chunk of this before. I don't know if it's the same chunk because it was a different book. But I've read a chunk of this before. It's well written. It's interesting to read. It's definitely something worth reading. Mary Wollstonecraft was very interesting. She's the mother of Mary Shelley. So I enjoyed that. And then after that, for September, we're supposed to read A Philosophical Inquiry into the Origin of Our Ideas of the Sublime and Beauty by Edmund Burke. But I'm behind, so I haven't read this yet. And then we're supposed to read The Arrest and Imprisonment of the King and Queen, which is included in an excerpt from Reflections on the Revolution in France, also by Edmund Burke. And that's this little thing. But I also have not read that of yet. And that's everything that we were supposed to read, did read in September for my literature classes, and everything that I've got marked down that I read in September, that was full books. I do not know how long I've been talking. My webcam took out on my old laptop, so I'm on my new laptop, which I hadn't filmed on before because I didn't have software, so I downloaded software. I don't know how I feel about the software yet. But, we'll see. Let me know if you like this. If going over my syllabi is too much for you guys, let me know. I just thought it might be interesting. I find it interesting what stuff we go over in literature classes, so I thought it might be interesting to you guys. If it's not, tell me and I won't do it next time because it's a lot of talking. But yeah, that's everything for September, and I'm hoping to be doing these wrap-ups again now. Yes. So, I will see you guys next time. Bye.